Today in class, we are going to take a field trip to the Longhorn Museum, located in a small town in South Texas called Pleasanton. Pleasanton is part of Atascosa County along with Jourdanton, Poteet, Charlotte, and Lytle, Texas. The Longhorn Museum is a monument to South Texas history from the 1500s to the 20th century. The museum is full of memorabilia that was donated by residents and business owners in Atascosa County. The Longhorn Museum was a gift from a local country radio station in the city of Pleasanton on May 15, 1983. The radio station was KBOP 1380 AM and was the first country radio station in the Lone Star State of Texas. The DJs were famous country singers Willie Nelson and Johnny Bush. When the KBOP was no longer running, most of the equipment and country music memorabilia, including autographed pictures of the country artists, were donated to the Longhorn Museum. In the 1720s, when the Mission San Jose in San Antonio, Texas was established, the occupants living within grew crops on a farm 2.5 miles long, and the stock were kept at a ranch 25 or 30 miles away called El Atascosa. This name may sound familiar to some of you. This is because El Atascosa Ranch is now Atascosa County. On the ranch, they had 5,000 head of sheep and goats, 3,000 head of cattle, 10 droves of mares, and 2 donkeys. San Jose Mission employed 150 workers who took complete charge of the land, acting as mule drivers, masons, cowboys, and shepherds. When the ranchers needed to round up the cattle, they decided to jump on the horse and use the horse to guide the cattle where they needed to go. The boys would round up the cows. This is why Pleasanton's nickname is the birthplace of the cowboy. So in the coming years, cattle were all over Texas, and people up north paid a lot of money for cows. But because Texas had so much more cattle than any other state at the time, cowboys could afford to sell them for much cheaper than they were up north. Most of the time, cowboys would guide all their cattle across Texas to sell them to northerners with nothing but a horse and a rope. Ranchers at this time would have to build a fence to keep their stock in and the Indians out. But fence was so expensive and did not always do the job. Fences were built out of rocks or wood or split rail, and thankfully in the 1800s barbed wire was discovered up north and passed the idea to Texas. Barbed wire was a thin wire and had thorn-like points throughout the entire fence and kept Indians out and the stock in. You may have seen this around because many ranches in South Texas region still use barbed wire. Along with ranching and farming in South Texas, trail driving was becoming big in Atascosa County. This was used because many years cowboys would take their cattle up north on horse, and this would usually take months before they were back home, and this made for a lonely cowboy. Instead, a few cowboys would get together and go all at once, so they had somebody to talk to on the way. Soon, with the Industrial Revolution, trail drives came to a stop and they were done for fun. With the Industrial Revolution, railroads were put all over the state of Texas. In 1912, a railroad company received land in Atascosa County, and the railroad company put a track and train station in each town. The name of the train always changed. The first name was the San Antonio and Uvalde Gulf Railroad. Then it was the Missouri Pacific Gulf Coast Lines, and finally it was the Union Pacific. Throughout all the name changes, people began calling it the Sausage, and sometimes you still hear people calling it by its nickname today. The Union Pacific donated a caboose to the Longhorn Museum so people can go and see what it was like to be inside a train in the 1900s. The Sausage was a big help to the cowboys in the time. They would take the cattle into the town to the train station and load them up on the train. The railroad was a phenomenon to the South Texas. The cattle were shipped up north and sold much faster. The cowboys were able to make more money faster. Many economic opportunities were brought with the arrival of the railroad. Atascosa County's population grew so much at this time. With this, people were able to open banks, grocery stores, doctor's offices, and gas stations. Atascosa County takes great pride in the Longhorn Museum and all the history that it represents for the South Texas region.